Hello.
Hello, it's Sean.
Hi, buddy. How you doing?
I'm a little on the tired side, a lot on the lonely side. I did get to talk to a couple of people shortly today, though.
Well, that's good.
Yes, ma'am. Did I wake you up?
No, I'm still trying to do homework, and your little ladybug friend, she's asleep, so I have to still feed her dinner. She came home from school today and was just pooped.
Well, it might be a little difficult to get her up in the morning, but when you're exhausted, you're exhausted.
Exactly. Gotta rest. She's kind of weird how she adapts. She'll stay up till like 1 in the morning, but then she'll get up at 6, no problem.
Well, I made a
Go ahead.
I made a lot of progress as far as that goes when I was younger. When I'm sleeping outside, I think I just hung up on you.
No, you're there. I'm here.
Okay. When I started sleeping outside, I started waking up with the sun. So as long as I had a window that didn't have something over it, I pretty well wake up that same way.
Yeah. Yep.
I made a tobacco pipe out of aluminum foil. I hope nobody confuses it for a crack pipe.
Yeah, better be careful with that one.
Right? I was supposed to go down pretty close to Colorado today. I got a friend of mine. She Well, I was down at their house last summer, and her husband is. She Now you're probably gonna understand this from the daughter's point of view too. Um, Last summer they were supposed to help me out, and because of what happened to Natalie, I was talking aloud quite a bit about speaking out against sexual predators and speaking up and, actually doing it instead of just letting those people get away with it.
Right.
Well, this lady, her husband was supposed to be helping me, and he wasn't. He was leaving all the time and leaving me with the kids. Actually, Shannon Alvarado, she got to have a couple conversations with me while I was watching them. But her daughter was trying to say that her husband had touched her inappropriately. And I didn't know. When I was there, she said that this lady had told me that her daughter said somebody had molested her, but was afraid to say who, which usually means it's either a parent or it's somebody in the household.
Correct.
And like, as far as that goes, her behaviors had changed, and I did notice that a lot of the littler kids, they weren't touching my genitalia or each other's genitalia, but they were very much not what I would consider appropriate as far as that goes.
Right.
But,
and as we know, being we were victims, we pick up on that. We see the signs.
Yes, ma'am. Well, what ended up happening is I was driving over to their house because the husband was having a major issue, and he can't stay off the meth, and he keeps blaming her for his meth use. And she had just started trying cocaine, the wife, and she decided to kick it cold turkey. But the problem is, he was flipping out one night, and he left her and told her a whole bunch of stuff about how he's not ever going to come back and how she's just using him. Now, mind you, he hasn't had a job now for 3 years. And she's taking care of everything. And I'm not, saying that he's a bad person for that, because he did get into a pretty serious accident. They all did.
Right.
But he treats them like shit.
Right.
And as far as the daughter goes, like, she eventually, after I left, had opened up to her mom about who it was, and her mom didn't know how to respond. And, that's why most of the women I know who grew up younger getting touched like that. Most of them hate their mom worse than they hate the guy who touched them.
Right.
So for this young woman who got molested, it's difficult. But also the mother doesn't. She says, they both lied to me, so I'm not sure who to believe.
Oh, Lord.
But I also, like, all right, when I get mad at Natalie's family, one thing that I said right from the very beginning is that her sister did the right thing. The reason for that is because if you're paranoid, you need to do something. Whether they are going to do it or not, you have to get it documented, which is the important thing for me as well. It's for me to show what these other people were doing for them. The problem is that nobody was protecting me, and I was the one who was actually being victimized, while they were paranoid that I would hurt them, which is the reason I was being
Right.
victimized. Now,
Correct.
exactly. So when I was over at this lady's house, I was driving over there because her husband was coming home. This was last summer. And I was driving over there, and when I was driving there, I ran a stoplight because it was so rainy out and it was wet. And so an officer pulled me over, and he told me I needed to go park it over by the high school, and they live by the high school in Sidney, Nebraska. So I went and parked it by the high school, and he said if he saw me driving it again, or if he drove by in the night and it wasn't there, he was going to give me a citation for it. So, or he told me if he saw me driving it again that night, he was going to arrest me, and if he didn't see it where I parked it in the morning, then he was going to give me a citation for it. Now, he didn't give me the citation, but at the time, my friend Desiree, the one that I was saying me and Rose have in common,
Yeah.
I rescued her from a meth house in Wyoming, and she was staying with me at the time. Now, I was keeping her and this guy away from each other because they're both addicted to meth, and my friend, like, she's dealing with this the best she can, and I had to park my car by the high school, so I parked it across the street over by their house. And then he was home, so he was, by the time I got there, so he was throwing a big tantrum, and he was crying, and, he was really pissed off. So I left, but I wasn't going to drive my car home, so I walked home in the rain. When I got back, Desiree was flipping shit the fuck out, and I left. Andrew's, or sorry, not Andrew. Uh, my friend had called me to let me know that her husband is gonna leave her if my car is still there in an hour. So I walked over and I got my car and I came back, and then she's telling me that, basically her marriage, because she called her husband out on his meth use and addiction, that it's going to be my fault they get a divorce if I don't pull my vehicle. So I typed him back that, I don't really feel comfortable associating with people who abuse their kids anyway. Now,
Yeah.
at the time, I didn't know about the husband touching the kids. I was just typing that because at that point in time, I had so many people emotionally putting their shit on me and emotionally abusing me that, like, one more person that I care about treating me like it's my fault that their life isn't working out. I'm doing the best I can to help out. I'm not there to destroy their lives. I'm there to try
Yeah.
to help. But also, like, he doesn't want me there because at that point in time, like, with him doing the things that he was doing, and with me, the whole situation with being called a child molester and a rapist, and the with Natalie and fucking sharing all of that stuff, like, her, I think that empowered her daughter to speak up, and that's the reason that he, after that night, hasn't associated with me. He was very rude and inconsiderate, and they both were basically trying to say that if they get a divorce, that it's my fault for having my car out there. So I didn't do it to be vindictive or an asshole. I did it so it would be their idea to not be my friend, and that way, like, they wouldn't have to feel bad about the whole conscience of it, and that way they could just sit down and deal with the shit they needed to take care of.
Right.
Well, they broke up, and this guy is, I, she needed somebody to go help babysit, and so I was going to go down there to babysit, and he was telling her that if that lunatic comes to my house, I'll call Child Protective Services or Social Services myself. And I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck did I ever do to this guy? Oh, yeah, the child molesting thing. Holy fuck.
Yeah, exactly. Take a good look in the mirror.
Right? Well, me and her had a conversation about that today. She's like, I was talking to her about it, but I wasn't sure. I was, at the time that it happened, she was saying that she thought it was her daughter's real dad that had done it. But, you know,
Oh.
today when I was talking to her, she's like, yeah, my daughter said that it was him who did it, my husband who did it, and I don't know who to believe. And I was like, oh, fuck, that's really going to suck. And I explained to her that most of the women that I know that hold a lot of hatred and resentment towards, one of their parents for being molested. It's not the parent that molested them, it's the one who they told and turned a blind eye.
Right. Well, the thing is, too, if she's acting out, and the mom's questioning her, how does that make you feel? You know what I mean? As someone that's speaking out, that's one thing that'll stick with me. Is with me, my mom showed up to court with my dad, and always remember that because that was a complete smack in the face. He's going to prison, but then on the other hand, you're supporting him rather than me and my sister, and that's what was tough. And I have a good relationship with my mom, and my mom has went through a lot of crap, and I have forgiven her for everything, and she's done the best she can having us young at 17. But it's just one of those things that you have to support your daughter. You have to support your kids over any man.
Absolutely. I typed a story today about a lady that I knew who, I really should send you that story. When we get off the phone, is it alright if I send it to you and you can tell me what you think?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, ma'am. I had I'm sure you got to see I rescued a lady.
I saw that, Jerry.
Yup. See, folks do pay attention.
I always pay attention. I just sit back and I read all your stuff, but I don't comment or anything on the stuff, but I pay attention. I read it and I say, yep, that's Sean.
Yep.
That's that awful, horrible, bad person Sean out there taking care of people. How dare he?
I've had about 20 or 30 people tell me that the reason they don't comment on my posts is because they got tired of being threatened, or they saw
Yeah,
too many other people being threatened and went, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put my
yeah,
friends or family at risk like that.
right,
I tell stories about you, but I use your first name only.
right.
I don't use your last name, and I don't talk about your kids' names or your phone number or where you live. I just, you know, first
Right.
names only.
Yep.
If you get your last name on there, then it means that you're somebody I want the cops to talk to.
Exactly. Ted Bollinger. Exactly.
Yep.
Candace, whatever. Yep.
And see, I love Candace. She's one of my oldest and dearest friends, but she didn't understand, and then she was intimidated by the police. Like, she was thinking, maybe some dumbass will show up, some punk like they do in chapel, some guy that you looked at his girlfriend funny, so he shows up at your house with a shotgun but doesn't actually intend to do something. And she's
Right.
talking about, well, if anybody comes in my house, puts my kids at risk, I'll put a 45 right between their eyeballs. And, first of
Right.
all, that makes me feel uncomfortable. And second of all, like, she was expecting, if there is trouble, it'll be trouble from, you know, these web wing nuts or whatever. And they did, they sent her, when I made that first video at Candace's house, people sent her videos, sent her pictures of her old house with those pictures on the wall. And before I got started making videos, I was going to take those pictures off the wall, and she said it would be all right. Well, 30 minutes later, she's telling me, all right, Sean, I have to close down my Facebook because they're sending me pictures of my old living room.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, people, it's funny how you look for support, you look for help, you look for genuine friends that aren't going to judge you or give you shit or tell you what you need to do and how you need to do it. But got these people that sit back and fucking just stalk nonstop of every detail, and it's crazy.
It's not every detail. They're searching in specific for stuff that they can twist to make me look like a bad guy. If they were
Well,
looking through every detail, they'd read it as a story in line. I mean, Natalie's texts and my texts, they're,
that's clear, yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's like 5 or 6 of the messages in there, maybe a few more they're permanently deleted. I can't post them up on Facebook. When I try, people just can't see them. It says attachment unavailable. It's because it's the same picture I posted up before that got me Facebook banned, believe it or not. Some of those messages between me and Natalie.
Right.
Also,
you mean the facts that
right.
You can't deny or lie about.
And the other thing is, I was banned twice, not once, but twice, for taking screenshots of people threatening my life on Facebook.
Right.
So they were able to use all that in court because I wasn't allowed to go. They were able to paint the picture however they wanted and pretend like I did these things because I'm psycho. Like, no, I'm doing these things to try to protect myself and my family and friends. It doesn't matter how much Candace is pissed off at me. The fact that I exposed all of that shit means if something happens to her, yeah, they're going to look at me, but they're also going to look at the people I spoke out against.
Exactly. And that's what's bullshit, is you're putting that stuff up there for a reason, for somebody to pay attention somewhere along the line, rather than, oh shit. And it's one of the Bollingers trolling or whatever, reporting it, because, oh shit, I don't want the truth getting out. I mean, I gotta protect that, one of their little trolls.
Yeah, they tried to, basically, when I was producing evidence in the truth for Natalie, or in the Real Justice for Natalie Bollinger No Drama group, as soon as I started posting up in there, nobody gave a shit about that group. Nobody. And then as soon as I started posting up, her family started getting in there and basically trying to bury the evidence under a whole bunch of basically shaming people for even looking. And that has happened in all of those. What I need is I need people to collect as much evidence as they can and send it to Officer Amanda Jonas in Longmont.
You should text that to Alyssa too, or message her, because I think Alyssa had talked to her and had a good conversation with her, and she was saying that she's definitely willing to talk to you, but if there's a way to give her all of that stuff and see if Alyssa has some time, I mean, even this weekend, to forward all of this stuff over to her, or even talk to her.
Well, that's the thing, is Officer Jonas is crooked. What she did was wrong. But now with the information that she has, it is completely understandable, just like with way back at the beginning. With the information they had, it's understandable why they blamed me. And it's also understandable why, because they assumed my guilt, that they weren't willing to look at it. However, it's slander that prevented them from doing it. And Amanda Jonas admitted things on court documents that show that she lied on court documents. It also shows that rather than say what actually happened, she forced her opinions in there, which her opinion was that Miss Shelley was a victim and she was visually scared of me, or, sounded shaken and scared of me, whereas me and Miss Shelley never had an issue. And me, I mean, I'm literally on the fucking edge of suicide because I can't get an officer to listen to me, and instead of I chose not to kill myself in order to try again one more time to get the officers to listen. And, she wrote down that she paraphrased it to make it sound like I was, out of my fucking mind, and I wasn't. I was legit being threatened across multiple states, multiple jurisdictions by multiple police officers.
Right. No, when Alyssa had talked to her, she admitted that she wished she listened. And she wished that, hello, you have somebody sitting behind bars. So obviously someone was accused and slandered and everything else. If you look at the big picture, anybody with a fucking brain in their head will realize, obviously, you weren't the one doing it, so why is your name still being run through the mud? Why are you still being threatened? Why are you still not being listened to?
Well, it's because all the stuff that I have tied up now, I've been tied up in the courts. All of my money has been tied up in the courts since I was assaulted by the Border Police in January. And everything that happened since that I had to put on Facebook is because since then, officers have treated me like I assault officers. It's on my permanent arrest record. It doesn't leave. No officer is going to listen to me because I was assaulted by an officer, multiple officers, and charged with assault.
Right, yeah, because they got to protect each other
Yep.
rather than thinking of maybe you did something wrong.
And
Maybe
it's obvious they had a plan from the start.
Had a code of conduct.
I wasn't trying to speak over you, I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. You were kind of muffled for a second.
Yeah, I was trying to smoke some tobacco. This little pipe here, it doesn't work out so good. It clogs pretty easily.
Oh.
But yeah, that's, you know, it's the not getting to hear familiar voices. Like right now, I'm hearing your voice and it's calming me down and it's helpful. But most of the time, I don't have those voices, and a voice is, it's not a good substitute for having a human being there.
Right.
I mean, I haven't gotten to see my friends or family in over 2 years without being threatened or assaulted, or having fear of being threatened or assaulted. And it's not the threats or the assaults that are the worst part. It's the fact that I just have to take it, because if I defend myself, I'm the one who goes to jail. And I've shown that repeatedly.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have to even deal with this bullshit because you've never done anything. And that's what just pisses me off.
Not true.
The beginning. You've done nothing.
In August, I definitely threatened the lives of those people who threatened my life and my family's lives. I got sick of it. After almost 2 years of that, I wanted them to know how it felt.
Yeah,
hundreds of people threatened me and got away with it.
I still don't think that you necessarily made it a threat. To me, the way that I took it.
If you do this, this, or this, I will do this. Right.
Yes. You're coming after me, so I'm going to defend myself now. I'm not going to take this shit anymore. That's how I understood it.
But the judges didn't get to see that part. The judges only got to see the part that they wanted to put forward. They coordinated with the police in Colorado to make sure I couldn't get to court. And that includes Officer Amanda Jonas and Officer Brian Valenzuela. And that also includes Alicia Bollinger. That includes Ted Bollinger. I mean, the fact is, right after they did that whole, here's your paperwork stuff, Ted Bollinger waited until afterwards to threaten my life. And then on the paperwork, it turns out that it wasn't him that they were talking about. It was his son who's on the paperwork.
Who's their son? Where does he live?
I'm not going to share any of that information, but
he's... I was wondering as far as... so he's probably closer to us.
Yeah, he's got the same name as his dad.
I've seen the Bollinger Jr., but I know that they're like North Glen, Thornton. They're close to where Alyssa lives.
Well, I don't know where any of them live. I mean, I could go through all of my files and find where all of their addresses are, because, that's the most fucked up part, is that, first of all, if these people are at risk from me, don't give me their fucking address.
Right, exactly.
They gave me Natalie's address, apparently on the protection order from her. It turned out it wasn't her address. Her dad was living there.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I noticed here. When that guy punched me in the face at the concert that me and Alyssa had gone to, and I mean, he fucked my face up good. There was a restraining order against the family, and because the husband hit me out of nowhere, and the girl jumped Alyssa, just standing there enjoying herself, didn't even know they were behind us, and there was a restraining order issued, and they put our fucking names and addresses, and it's like, seriously, they live like in North Glen, and I'm like, why would you do that? There's a restraining order, so you're just giving them our address? It's a piece of paper.
Right. Well, they didn't just do that with Natalie's address. See, that ended up being Ted's address. That's the really messed up part, is that I really feel that Ted made Natalie do that. And I also really want to see video footage from that courthouse, because, I've had this paranoid thought in my head, and I know it's a paranoid thought, but what if Alicia's the one that did it, went in there posing as Natalie?
As far as what?
As far as Natalie's protection order.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know that her father pressured her into that because she hadn't talked to her dad in 6 months before I exposed him on his Facebook. And when she called me and said, you fucked things way up worse with my family, the thought that went through my head at that point in time is, you fucked up every friendship that I have.
Right.
So, I mean, when I hung up on her, I thought it was a dream when I woke up later, but then, just a few days later, I get that protection order, and then, not soon after that, she's fucking dead.
Right. Yeah, no, that family, I mean, definitely has got some shady tendencies. There's no question there. So I wouldn't put anything past them. I mean, the way that Ted was on her Facebook coming at you and pretending it's her, I mean, I wouldn't put anything past them.
The worst part is I still haven't gotten the cops to take a look. I mean, I carried around all of that evidence for forever and a fucking day. Every single lawyer I talked to, I tried to show that to. I took it with me everywhere. And, everywhere that I had issues, it's because they wanted to do everything that they could not to take a look. After the border police assaulted me, yeah, every single officer that I've dealt with since then has gone out of their way not to take a look. I had to literally chase down the officers in Chapel, Nebraska for a half an hour.
Right.
So, a lot of these charges that I was charged with, like in Boulder, they knew they'd done wrong. So, they were able to frame me up better over at Clearview by only allowing part of the video evidence into court. However, I haven't even been allowed to have an actual court date. It's been continuance for, from January to August. They continued that shit without allowing me a court date. Just, we're going to continue it. Oh, well, it's too late to get this because it's past 30 days. It's too late for you to get that evidence because it's past 90 days. It's too late for you to get that evidence because it's past 180 days. Hey, Sean, we think that you should go to a mental institution, and we're going to try to have court without you because we don't feel that you can assist in your own defense.
Jesus Christ, give me a break.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they're all refusing to look at the evidence. Matter of fact, when I was in Arapahoe County, they lied to me repeatedly to try to get me to do things that were against my best interest. Like, all right, you have 30-something days in order to have your pretrial hearing thing. But they waited until after that was already expired, and then my lawyer didn't show up to court. And they're like, all right, well, you have to sign this or you have to plead. And I've got a temporary attorney, my attorney in Arapahoe County, our public pretender was, what was her name? Pamela Carty. And Pamela Carty, I literally threatened to sue every single public pretender's office that dealt with me because they kept on doing the same thing, refusing to look at any of the evidence. She was.
She flat out fucking lied to me and then lied to you.
Yep.
And then she says, oh, well, we keep calling these people and they're not returning our calls. No, you called me one time.
Right?
Don't lie. Don't sit there and lie and go back and make us look like assholes to you when you're dealing with enough shit as it is. But don't sit there and lie if you're not going to do your damn job.
The other thing is, I let her know about the abuse that I was enduring in there, and she didn't care. That's the thing, is that I literally pled guilty to crimes that I shouldn't have had to plead guilty to because they wouldn't do their jobs. I mean, literally, I could have been let off on technicalities. They should have let me off the first week. The fact is, I was being threatened and assaulted, and I needed to force the cops to take a look. I'd tried the FBI, who basically shrugged me off, treated me like shit, and let me know that even if I did go down to their main office in Denver, that I probably wasn't going to get past security.
Right.
So, it's not like I didn't make an effort, and people are like, all these people offered you help. Yes, but did they offer me the help that I needed?
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, with Pamela Carty lying to you, it's pretty important to get that stuff documented so that I can take that stuff to court. But then I don't want you and your family at risk for speaking out against law enforcement in Colorado. And the other
But the
thing
thing
is,
is, it's a fact. I mean, they have phone records. They have documentation on how many times they called us, how many times they called Alyssa. I mean, don't sit there and say you called all these people when you didn't.
right? And that's another
Just
thing. Like she did.
when,
Go ahead. Sorry.
as soon as we found out where you were at, we both put money on your books, and you didn't even know you had it.
It wasn't on there. They literally never put it on my books the whole time I was there. It wasn't until Alyssa put it on my last week or so there when, it was already too late to do any good. I'm like, you fucking screwy cops. All
Right.
the stuff they pulled. Like, I
Yeah.
was supposed to have a court-ordered phone call, and they didn't allow me to have it, and they kept on losing it, quote unquote. And then, they're like, well, if there was one, it would be on electronic record. And then they're like, oh, well, we lost it again. And then they're like, oh, we found it. It was on a different ward. And then I was like, fuck, this is such the screwed up situation. And then finally, they allowed me a phone call when it was way too late. And then they allowed me another court appointed phone call because the very next day I had court. And then they came back with the first court order that I had just gotten to talk to you. That's who I called with it. And they're like, oh, well, you already had a phone call. You already had your court appointed one. I'm like, no, I didn't. I got one yesterday. There's a court appointed one for this week, too. And they're like, well, we aren't going to give that to you because, we have two of these upstairs, and this is the one that we happened to grab. And, then the officer who was doing it is an officer who had taken part in an assault against me and also taken part in pretending I was suicidal to prevent me from speaking out against Officer McRae. So, McRae and Thorne, matter of fact. And like, these officers were so busy protecting each other's asses, they had people who were pretending to be investigators coming in and talking to me, not writing anything down, and basically treating me like shit the whole time. And then it's the you're guilty until proven innocent thing when you're broke. And if you don't have the money for a real lawyer, you sit in jail. You have no access to your lawyer. You have no access to the evidence. They don't allow you to have it in there because you might hurt somebody from inside of the jail with that information. I'm like, fuck, And all the lying that they did on those pieces of paper, my attorney wasn't willing to do anything about that either. And that happened the whole time I was in Arapahoe County. I was being abused the whole time I was in there. Every single roommate I had hated me by the time that I was no longer their roommate because I would not stop trying to make a report. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week while I was locked up.
Yep. Well, the thing is I thought that when you were in jail, I thought you could bitch about anything. I want to make a report about I didn't get a peanut butter sandwich. I mean, I thought you could go in there and plead your case no matter what, whether it's irrelevant or not.
Yeah, isn't that nice? Well, see, if it's a peanut butter sandwich, they might actually read it. If you fill out a report against another officer, they're going to throw the ones that you can prove beyond any shadow of a doubt with video evidence. They throw those away and pretend they didn't happen. And they kept having problems with the electronic kiosk, so then they change over to paper. And then the paper allowed them to pretend that it didn't exist at all. And then they went back to the kiosk, and then the kiosk wouldn't work. And then they went back to the paper because the kiosk wasn't working. And then, like, basically they were able to pretend the whole time because they had electronic difficulties that they had given me access to all this stuff and I just didn't want it, or that I didn't make a report. And I made so many. I literally have 5 police reports filled out by other inmates. You know how fucked up it has to be for another inmate to be willing to risk that kind of abuse from officers to speak out about the
Right.
abuse?
Yep.
You know? And they're speaking out about how I was abused.
Right.
The officers wouldn't take those, so I held them until I was released. But instead of releasing me on the 15th like they were supposed to, they postponed all that shit. My lawyer lied to me repeatedly to get me to plead guilty to something I should not have. The postponement agreement thing, you know, it's already past due. So legally, they should have dropped the charges right there. But my
Right.
lawyer wouldn't fight that either. She literally would do nothing to defend me, just like every other public pretender. And then
Yeah,
the
no, she was
officers,
useless. She was awful.
I agree. You know, you're not the only person she talked to that she was rude and inconsiderate to. Miss Peaches didn't
Yeah.
really have anything nice to say about her either, and I don't think Alyssa said anything nice.
No. I mean, because we tried to get information as far as, okay, where's he at? How do we do this? How do we do that? I can't tell you anything. Well, what the fuck? Why are you calling me then? What do you want from me if you're not going to tell me anything regarding you on your behalf and your safety, your well-being, and when's he being released and what is his charges of nothing? Nothing. Instead, we had to go online when we put money on your book to see what you were charged with, and me and Shannon were two of them that were just stalking you nonstop to find out, okay, where's he at? When's his next court date? Where's he located at? What are his charges? What's he looking at as far as time if this is the worst case scenario? I mean, we'd sit there and like stalk your court cases all the time. Okay, and then we'd call the court. Okay, did he have court today? No, postponed again. Postponed again. Like,
Postponed again. Yep. I had 20
Yep.
court dates that I went to, over 20 court dates that I went to between January of 2018 and August of 2018 when they arrested me. They didn't arrest me that whole time or allow me to have my court date because they were waiting on something that they could peg on me to make everything that they did okay. It's okay that we did all of these things all year long because we eventually got him to snap in August.
Right.
And that's the thing, is that I literally, I didn't threaten to kill anybody. My mom and my dad, see, my dad tells me recently that he's afraid of me, and I tell him that he should be. Now, for him, he's thinking, well, you know, Sean's telling me that I should be afraid of him because he's going to hurt me. No, he should be afraid of me because I'll tell the truth. I'll say it like it is.
Yeah.
You know? I'm not going to go sugarcoating stuff.
You're not going to hurt anybody, but you know what? Your words and the truth, and that's hurtful. So I can hurt you with the truth. I don't need to put hands on you to hurt you.
Exactly.
Everything that you've done is enough.
No, what I really needed is people to show up in court, but, you know, people said, hey, I'll show up, I'll show up, I'll show up, and then, you know, when court came around, either I was on a Facebook ban and they hadn't sent me their phone numbers, or they just didn't show up, and later on they're like, oh, well, I'm sorry I had this going on, or I had that going on, and there was even worse stuff, like a lot of people had deaths in the family, and like with you, with the infections with your kids, and being sick, and all of that stuff, like, this is stuff that they're like, oh, well, and they wrote this on the paperwork, by the way, oh, well, you know, he doesn't have any friends who are willing to come with him, probably because of the way he acts. He doesn't have any friends.
No. Why don't you look at the Bollinger family that would be there threatening us in the area?
Right? And you live in that area.
Yeah, we live very close. I don't know exactly where I think Ted's out of Boulder. I don't know where he's at now. Well, he's locked up, I assume. But,
yeah. Actually, the thing that he got locked up for is in the messages between me and Natalie. Him and his brother were both messing around with meth. Both of them got in trouble for it.
That's the point. That's exactly what Natalie has said, and that's what you said from the beginning. He's the freaking rapist. He's the damn pimp. He's the one that caused Natalie to be so messed up because of the damage he did to screw her up.
She was mad at her mom about that, too. Same as, like what you were talking about. And the lady I was staying with in California, she said the same thing.
Yep.
I mean, when people think I'm bullshitting about this, It's the people who have not been through it who just want to make a judgment and assume that they're right and just hate me because they assume because a pretty girl said so that I must be some sort of fucking terrible excuse for a human being. Now, the thing
No,
is,
not at all.
Natalie never once said that I raped her or molested her or touched her inappropriately. Not even once.
Nope.
That was Ted
And
Bollinger and Tim Beeson.
I've gone over it all. Gone over all of the evidence. Anything that you've ever posted, I have read front to back, over and over, and not once have I ever once read of anywhere of her accusing you of anything. And that's I don't know. Maybe you are right that she did not get that restraining order. Maybe Ted forced her to go down there and do that, and maybe Natalie was high at the time and using a lot, and her sister went down there with her ID. I don't know.
Well, it says no ID. On the paperwork, it says that Natalie had no ID.
Well,
the other thing
you know
is,
better than I do. Does she carry ID with her?
I don't know. See, I hadn't really associated with her since Virginia. Like after Virginia, everything that I tried to contact her, every single time, it was to try to get this bullshit to stop. I didn't ask her where she was, who she was dating, who she was with, where she was at.
Right.
None of that mattered. What mattered is that I couldn't see my friends and family in Boulder, and I needed them.
Right.
And, it all... Natalie didn't say those things about me. Maddie Boa did.
Right. Well, shit. Maybe, you said, wasn't it Maddie's a meth head too?
Yeah, she was the one that spread the rumor to all of her customers in Boulder. She was,
Well, how do you know it wasn't her that got some meth from Ted and she went down there and did it? I know it's one of those throwing shit at a wall and seeing if it sticks, but...
Maddie hates Ted.
Does she?
Yeah. Maybe she loves him now, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure by the way that Maddie talked about Ted the one or two times that he was brought up, she knew what was going on too.
Right. But when you got drugs involved,
yep.
People do a lot of stuff when, you know what, hey, I can get some free drugs. That's why a lot of women become prostitutes.
My ex-boyfriend beat me up, but, he's got the drugs. Maybe I can use this Sean thing to get some more heroin.
Exactly. Yeah.
In that Sword to Scale episode, the 109 and 110, Ted blamed everything that he did on Joey Moreno, the current boyfriend. Natalie had two current boyfriends, Joey Moreno and Justin Ward. Now, Tim Beeson was the abusive ex. If you look on Natalie Bollinger's YouTube page, you'll notice that the oldest songs on there are now, I believe they're now 6 years old, almost, on her playlist for Tim. He stole her dog, and he blamed that on Joey Moreno. He also had her on drugs, which he blamed on Joey Moreno. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that Joey Moreno was, not innocent, but at the same time, Tim was the one who was dating her. He claimed that he didn't start dating her until 2017. He said, well, I just started dating her last year, and that was on the Sword and Scale episode. He's like, I just started dating her in 2017. Like, no, dude, you fucking went hunting for that little girl at her school.
Right, and that's sick. But to me, the guy sitting in jail, to me, in my gut, since day one, there's a missing piece somewhere. Whether it's...
Like maybe he wants his son to be taken care of and he's got cancer?
What was that?
Like maybe he wants his son to get taken care of and he's got cancer or some crazy shit like that?
Well, no. I'm thinking, does he have a kid?
I don't know. I think Joseph Lopez was supposed to have a fiance and a kid, but I didn't really look into him all that much.
Yeah, see, I don't know anything about him. All I knew is he was a pizza delivery guy, gamer, and a loner is all I knew. But I was wondering, I'm like, okay, find an ad on Facebook to do what he did. Why would you risk the rest of your life being locked up for murder, and for what? Unless you owed somebody something, or you owed a debt, or you were something just still doesn't sit right to this day. It's almost like there's a missing piece somewhere.
The missing piece? You know, the thing is, I want to say it's simple. What's simple is he saw that ad on, or that thing on her Facebook, and decided that he could get away with it and somebody else would take the downfall. But then when it turned out that that Craigslist ad was real,
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's not the case.
No. It just, like I said, it just feels that there's missing pieces in there somewhere. Somewhere. I mean, whether he was being threatened or whether it was for a drug that he had to pay money. I don't know. There's just, I don't know.
Look at her pictures. She is not somebody who ever wears all black. She was killed wearing all black. Her socks were different colors. They weren't matching, but the rest of it was all black.
Right.
Also, there's the whole thing of, like, what if he saw that and he just raped her and fucking freaked out because she was already on the news and fucking dumped her?
Right.
But then it's the whole black clothes thing and that Craigslist ad. And she had been suicidal over her parents for years. I mean, every time, when you see a girl who's cutting on herself, most of the time it's her dad who's molesting her. But that's not why she's cutting on herself. She's cutting on herself because she tried to tell mom and mom wouldn't listen.
Yeah.
And most people don't get that. That's why, like, a lot of women have animosity towards their mother, like we had been discussing. Almost 30 women have spoken to me about that, feeling exactly the same way since Natalie died.
Right. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. You just feel like, you know what, if you can't trust your mom or you can't trust your dad, who the hell do you have you can really, truly, genuinely trust?
It was me until I had a panic attack.
Yeah.
She was my best friend for a reason. I knew the shit that she went through, but she also knew the shit that I went through. When she was suicidal because I wasn't there, I showed up. When I was suicidal over things that I didn't do, that she could have put a stop to, she treated me like shit. And her friends treated me like shit. And she played even more like I was out to hurt her, and I wasn't. But her friends were actually hurting me. Her friends' fucking customers were actually hurting me. And I actually couldn't see my family. Well, she got to move on like nothing happened. Like, oh, well, it doesn't matter that this man's life is destroyed. I'm in college. I have a boyfriend. I have access to heroin. I have access to a gun. I can play this for all I want. But it got to the point where I was punished for her paranoia. Like, I didn't even know when I was walking up Federal so that I could make it there in time to go see Miss Peaches to get a ride to Boulder so that I could go see Miss Natalie for the appointment, and it ended up being the protection order. She was texting to Tim that I walked right by her house. Like, fuck, I didn't know I walked right by your house. I didn't find that out until later. Like, when it turned out to be a protection order, I was pissed because I'd been trying to get the protection order for over a year. And here she is in Virginia, gets a protection order from me from all those miles away, and I can't even get a protection order in Colorado against people threatening my life in Colorado. And then when it turned out, that she was dead, I was like, well, did she die here or Virginia? I didn't even know.
Right.
So I was punished for their paranoia, and that's the way that it's been most of my life. People assume that I would do bad stuff. And then they date assholes, and then they need a rescue from that asshole, and I rescue them, and then they get lonely, and they have to go back to the asshole, because if not, they're going to completely break down because they can't live without a relationship. And then, When they're back with the dude, they're like, well, he's pissed off at me. I'll just blame it on Sean. And then it doesn't even have to be me. It's any decent dude who helps a woman out of that situation. And she's so desperate that she wants to go back into that situation. And it's terrible because some of these women are so kind, so nice, and they are physically appealing. So it's not like they can't find another dude. They just have shit with self-esteem because they were raised that way. Their mom dated assholes just like Natalie's mom did.
Exactly, and they can't get out of that cycle.
The problem is, I'm tired of this punishment, I mean, people are like, well, Sean, you write out a report for me and I'll just sign it, shit like that. And I'm like, I have so much on my plate. I have to stop working on this stuff to calm down for 2 or 3 hours at a time. That's how overwhelmed I am. For me to recover.
You definitely do. I mean, you need to rest. You need to just kind of take a minute to breathe and get your head right. Just kind of go outside, go for a walk, and just relax for a minute. Otherwise, you're going to just end up freaking so damn overwhelmed. You're going to end up in a panic attack if you're not.
Whereas going to Walmart and teaching somebody about roly-polies helps me.
Exactly.
Teaching people about abuse. Go ahead.
Oh, she's done. Well, that's great.
Alright, that one's got a decent amount of tobacco in it.
I bet her dad's really angry. She'll be the water girl. Yep. No, Emily's friend, soccer, she's played soccer and she's getting ready to start high school season, and she decided, I was going to play basketball, and her dad's like, no. She's like, well, I want to play basketball. She tore her ACL completely and her meniscus completely and now has to do surgery, and she's going to be completely out for over a year.
Oh, you're sports nuts.
Yeah. It's just like, oh.
I kind of figured you for the baseball mom, actually.
Well, Alyssa was softball.
Yeah.
Alyssa was softball, and then the other two, they're all soccer. And I don't know why, because I hate it. I hate soccer, but we ended up gosh, Emily is so tall and thin. I mean, she's only like 112 pounds, and I mean, she's playing against 19-year-old girls that are just beasts, that are grown women driving, basically, and I have my little Emily that's just getting picked up and thrown on the ground like it's a UFC fight. It's just like, oh my God.
Yeah, I hate it when I go to a fight and a hockey game breaks out.
Oh yeah. That's a soccer game anymore. Yep. But Erin, she's a little beast. I mean, she's solid, and she'll just truck you and not even look back at you. She's fast and solid, so she'll just take off running and just elbow you, knock you to the ground, and just keep on going.
Yeah, I was noticing your kids look kind of like Candace, or like Tabby's kids.
Do they?
They do. Actually, your youngest daughter looks, my friend Amy in Nebraska has a daughter that looks very similar to her. And then
that's funny.
Your oldest daughter, there's actually a couple of people in Chapel, Nebraska that look similar to her. So
that's funny. It's funny how Alyssa and Erin are twins. And then Emily is the tall, skinny one that's no curves, but just tall, that looks like a model almost.
I don't know, I see your kids as kids.
Yeah.
I guess I don't... It's not that I don't find people physically attractive. I understand physical attractiveness, but I approach it from a scientific point of view, confirmation, like you would with a horse. Like, is this person equally proportional? Or are they,
right.
And that's the thing that humans are attracted to as far as physical attractiveness, is a sense of proportion.
Right.
So...
Yep. But Erin gets very insecure because she's like, Emily's so much prettier than me. And I'm like, no, you're 11 years old. You are growing into your body, you're growing into your face, your teeth, your yourself. But you know what? You are you. And Emily she's just smaller. I mean, she was a 5-pound baby. She's just smaller and always stayed smaller.
I got a few friends who are preemies that are huge now.
Do what?
I said I got a few friends who are preemies that are huge now.
Yeah. Emily, like I said, she's 5'7". I mean, she's still growing, but she's just athletic and she just can't gain weight. So she's just a little beanpole. I mean, she's healthy, but she's just always been small, and it's made me mad because I take her to the doctor. They're like, "Oh, she has cellular thrive." No, she doesn't. She's athletic. That's what athletes look like. They're just small.
Well, it depends on the type of athlete. If you're a weightlifter, you're probably not.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely.
But if you're playing an active sport like, baseball or something like that, it's not necessarily beneficial to have huge muscles.
No, and I mean, she could go and eat Big Macs all day long, eat 12 a day, and she would not gain any weight because she'll run it off.
Right.
So, I mean, no matter what she does, I mean, our goal for her was by the time she was a senior that she would weigh 100 pounds. And she's up to, I think, about 112, 114 her junior year. So I'm like, all right, you've passed it. Now you can get out of your baby car seat. She's like, shut up, Mom. I tell her when she's bad, I'm going to put her in a car seat.
Is there any way I could hang up on you just a couple of minutes, long enough to go to the bathroom?
Well, I actually got to go wake up little Erin to actually feed her because otherwise she's not going to have dinner.
Well, I won't hate you for it. Go ahead.
You can give me a call back tomorrow if you have time and you want to talk, and I'll have Beckham for a little bit tomorrow, but I'll make time to talk to you if you want. Yes,
ma'am. I'd like to discuss some possibilities of getting this information to somebody, because, I mean, you're an important witness. Your daughter's an important witness. So's Shannon.
Right.
So's Dan, even though guys are different. Like, women, I've noticed that most of the guys pretty well just threw me away from the start, and a lot of them had really mean things to say. Even the ones that supported me, like, they're thinking that if they send me money, then I owe them to take my time where I need to be doing other things to protect myself. They want me to do things that I've already done,
Right.
And then they want verification and proof. And then even if I send them verification and proof, if what they wanted to have happen didn't happen, then they get angry at me. And that's the thing. Like with Dan, Shannon listens, but she's got a lot of stuff going on in her life. You listen extremely well. Dan doesn't. He's very monotone. He says he doesn't really want to talk much, and then he gets very opinionated after saying that. So it's tough for me because most guys are that way with the man up thing. And even Dan did that to me. You need to man up. You need to this. You need
to that.
Man
up to what? What the hell do you need to man up for?
Well, see, that's the thing.
What the hell have you done to man up to shit?
Well, the way I look at it, I have been manning up. Between getting violent with people and taking it and speaking out, I chose to take it and speak out. I mean, literally, I could have killed every volunteer. I could have. I've had the resources to do it. I had to take a look at it and go, all right, I'm spending $600 a month on going to court, and I can't feed myself. So I have two choices here. I can either go to court, or I can get warrants out for my arrest and try to take care of myself.
Right.
The idea of going and killing Bollingers never entered my mind.
Right.
Anyway, I'm going to let you go because I super have to pee.
Alrighty. Well, you have a good night, my friend. Be safe, alright?
You too, Mandy. I love you. Thank you very much.
Love
you are a rock star.
I'm here. Alrighty. I'm always here.
Bye.
Alright. Bye-bye.